Construction can't afford to do the type of innovation that we see out there. We've got all these ideas. We've got these people that we've hired to be creative people for us, to be innovators. But their success rate is 15%.
Stream Logistics is all in on solving the intricacies of high-stakes freight. Offsite construction brings tremendous benefits to the construction industry, and through strategic connections and conversations, we'll not only increase our understanding, but bring awareness and continue to help propel this industry forward. In this first special episode, we sat down with our friend, Danny Small, to talk about what makes him so successful and how he looks at innovation in this space. Welcome to the Offsite University podcast with Carson and Chad.
Alongside Chad Patton, I'm Carson Holmquist, and together we run Stream Logistics, a company dedicated on solving the intricacies of high-stakes freight. And no industry better exemplifies a high-stakes environment than the offsite construction industry. So today we're going to go all in with Danny Small from Da Vinci Consulting. And Danny has been at the ground level of some of the industry's top manufacturers. So you see the offsite construction industry from up close, and you have an interesting perspective. So we're excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Carson. Welcome. Chad. Really excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Danny, you built an impressive reputation in the industry, obviously. And for those of our listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about you and your company.
Yeah, so I've spent, I guess, a little over 21 years now in the construction industry, and been involved through that time in marketing, sales, business development, product development, innovation, and then consulting and strategy in the last few years. And spent during that time a lot of time working with different types of companies. I've built companies over the years, built startups, all the way up to working with global 100 manufacturers, product manufacturers. And through that time, picked up a lot of things that I felt like the industry could use help with, specifically in the area of innovation. And so I've become a real devotee, I guess, of innovation. And that's been kind of colored by my engineering background. And so ultimately I decided, I wanted to combine those things. And I really have been able to combine the commercial and the technical throughout my career. But, having worked for other consulting firms for several years, finally decided to go out on my own. Had a little help from COVID to help me make that decision. As things got cut back, I got COVIDed out of my job. And so I decided, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing because I really enjoy being focused on the construction industry and being able to bring, I guess, my perspective on helping construction companies innovate. So that's how I came to be where I'm at. There's more background that I can go into, but that's basically how the company came to be. And I've been doing this for, I guess it'll be 2 years come next spring. So
very cool.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, congrats on your success. It's funny you mentioned that because I think Carson probably, he and I could speak from the same tone where it seems like a lot of startup companies, or when you start your own company, a lot of that starts from frustration or learning what not to do at other places.
Right.
You've been embedded. You're surrounded by things. When you start, I've always said, when you start scratching your head and asking questions, that's when you know you're almost destined for entrepreneurship. It's really when it happens. It's that aha moment where you're like, hey, I can do this better. I can put my own modern spin on this business, and this is what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden, whether it's COVID or that pivotal moment, you become a trailblazer in your own space. Yeah. And I think that's really cool because he and I can definitely share a lot of that same sentiment that you shared there with us. So that's really cool. Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exciting. Wow. So you said you paired two concepts together that aren't normally paired, which is engineering and innovation. Mm-hmm. I think people have this perception of innovation and creativity that you either have it or you don't. and there's creative people, and then there's uncreative people.
The rest of us.
Right. And then, especially from an engineering mindset where it's so logical based, and you don't normally connect that to the creative aspect of humans. So how have you paired those together, and how do you think you can unleash creativity and innovation through an engineering outlook?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm really passionate about this piece, so buckle up. Because this is really core to my whole approach, my whole philosophy in consulting in the construction industry. And it really goes back all the way to my college days. I started off in college in international business, then changed my major to business management with a minor in Japanese. That's a whole nother story.
Interesting.
Wow.
Then I switched those and majored in Japanese for a time and minored in business management. In my junior year, middle of my junior year, I was married by then, and I just had this itch, right? I had this angst, I guess, in the back of my mind, and I just couldn't get away from it. I had seen through my business management classes, I had, we do case studies and that kind of thing, and you study different companies. And I had noted that in almost every company, there was this wall between the technical people, whether it's engineering or R&D or what have you, and the marketing and sales people, right? I mean, they're like from different planets, right? They speak completely different languages. They don't understand each other. They think differently. They approach things differently. Some of the most heated arguments in a company are between R&D and marketing, right? Because the engineering folks are like, we can build anything. And that's what they love to do, right? They love to design stuff, design cool stuff with almost no regard to the marketplace, right? They don't care whether somebody wants to buy it, right? They want to invent cool stuff. The marketing folks, on the other hand, are the opposite, right? They are plugged into and they care about what the market wants. And much of the time, they're not really plugged into what's physically possible, right? So, they end up asking for a perpetual motion machine, and the engineering folks just shake their heads. And so there's this conflict constantly between engineering and marketing, the technical and the commercial. And I decided, I want to be, somebody needs to be a bridge between those two, because there's real dysfunction there. And so in the middle of my junior year, I changed my major once again for like the fourth time, went back, started over with an engineering degree. For the last year and a half of my schooling, I took 18 credits every semester of nothing but engineering classes because I was done with everything else. And I graduated in mechanical engineering with a minor in business management, actually a double minor in business management and Japanese. But it wasn't because I wanted to be a full-time engineer. It was because I wanted to be that bridge. I wanted to be the hybrid, right? The guy who understood both languages, who understood both sides of that fence, to try to resolve some of that conflict, right? I wanted to be the type of marketer who really understood the technology, and the type of engineer who really understood the market. And so I've tried to leverage both of those sides of my background all throughout my career. I kind of fell into construction through the dot-com recession in the early 2000s because I desperately needed a job. And so I started digging ditches for a semi-custom home builder in the Northwest. But over the years, I've been able to use my engineering background and my marketing and business degree to try to resolve some of those things, right? To try to bring some sense to the idea of innovation and business development in the construction industry. And so fast forward to, probably 8 years ago, I got introduced to Offsite construction, immediately fell in love with it. As I started to learn more and more about how the construction industry works, I realized that construction, as most of us know now, is kind of infamous for its slow adoption of innovation, right? It's slow adoption of technology and things like that. And so I started to get the sense that maybe this approach of using an engineering type method to apply to innovation could help the construction industry. I've learned from a lot of luminaries in innovation, Clayton Christensen, Tony Ulwick, right? Actually worked for Tony's company for a time. Learned a lot about jobs to be done and how they approach it there. And so I really came to feel like this type of a hybrid approach where we combine an engineering and scientific approach with the innovation process can really be helpful to construction because, as you said, innovation I think has gotten a bad reputation for being this risky, creative process where, like you said, if you got it, you got it. If you don't, sorry, too bad. So we have to, hire these people with, scarves and colorful glasses and these creatives, and we have to let them do our innovation for us because that's how innovation works. And we just kind of throw stuff against the wall, and if it sticks, great. If not, oh well, we throw some more money at it and roll the dice and try again. It doesn't have to be that way, I don't think. And my experience bears that out, that just like every other process in business, from finance to manufacturing to sales and everything else, we've got KPIs, we've got data, we've got analytics that drive those things. Why not innovation, right? Why does innovation get a pass? Why do we approach it like it's just this game of roulette? So it just made sense to me to apply an engineering approach to the innovation process to reduce risk and try to make it more reliable. So that's what I do.
And it can't be easy because it seems like that's it's not a common approach. It's not like there's not a textbook for that you can just read it and then apply it. So I mean, I know you pretty well through conversations now that you've grabbed concepts and you've merged them and you've integrated them to accomplish this mission. Mm-hmm. And it seems like one of the cornerstone concepts in your approach is that jobs to be done innovation process.
Right.
So for those who aren't familiar with that process, give an overview and then how that process unlocks some of the keys to innovation.
Right. So jobs to be done is an innovation paradigm, if you will, that was made famous by Clayton Christensen, the famous Harvard professor who's now passed away. He wrote his seminal work was The Innovator's Dilemma, and he followed that up by The Innovator's Solution, and that's where he really started to talk about this concept of jobs to be done, innovation. That was built upon massively by Tony Ulwick and his work in outcome-driven innovation. He has actually taken it a long ways as far as applying a structured approach to jobs to be done innovation. So I owe a lot of what I know about this type of an approach to him and to what he's done. But like you said, taking from lots of different sources, lots of different folks who have studied this and really taken it to great heights. I've combined that with a Lean Six Sigma approach. But back to jobs to be done innovation. The basics of jobs to be done innovation is that it's a philosophy that says the only reason that people buy services or products is to help them get a job done or make progress in their lives in some area. Whether that's trying to build a house or trying to teach their kids to be good adults, or trying to find someone to marry, or trying to, look cool for your friends, right?
So all of those would be examples of jobs.
Jobs, right? Okay. Those are all things that somebody wants to get done. Things that a person wants to do, right? And so if you think about it, everything that you've ever bought in your life, you bought because you were hoping that it would help you progress somehow or get something done, right? And so when we look at innovation from that standpoint and look at these jobs, it makes things a lot more clear because on the other hand, if you look at things from a solution standpoint, which most companies do, you're looking at something that changes all the time, right? So a great example is, so drills over the years. We started off hundreds of years ago with a hand auger, and then with a hand drill, and then with a battery operated drill or an electric drill, and then now we've got robotic drills, right? So the technology or the solution has changed much over the years, over the centuries, but the job of wanting to make a hole in something has never changed, right? So if you focus on the technology or the solution, you're going to be constantly be left behind, right? Like, buggy whip manufacturers, or like cassette tape, Walkman, Sony Walkman. Those things come and go, but the job doesn't change. So focusing on the job is going to provide a lot more stability and a lot more assurance that you're focusing on something that's not going to change. Another thing to keep in mind about jobs to be done is that the customer is the only expert on that job. And that also helps us to keep things in their swim lanes as far as who's in charge of what. One of the big mistakes that companies make in their market research or in their innovation is that they focus on the solution and they go to their customers and they say, what do you think of our doohickey, right? Or they say, how can we make our doohickey better? Or what would you like to see in a doohickey? How should we design our next doohickey, right? They're all about the solution. And what ends up happening is that they're asking customers to comment on something that they have no business commenting on, right? These customers aren't product designers. They're not engineers, right? So they don't have the expertise to advise you on that. That's why you've got people that you employ to help you develop the solutions, right? So what we ask the customers about instead under jobs to be done is we ask them about the job that they're trying to get done. That's what they're the expert on. And they're the only ones that are the expert on that. So we get the information from the customers about the job and how that works, what they're trying to get done, how they measure success, et cetera. And then we leave the solution development to our people. And so that dramatically reduces the risk. It reduces the time. It reduces the cost of innovation because now we're not confused about what the needs are in the marketplace because we've gotten them straight from the customer about something that doesn't change, which is their job. So that's the basics of jobs to be done.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So
it's a very long answer to your question.
You're understanding the needs from a deep level, right? And breaking it down into a job or multiple jobs. And then that informs your creative process and how you're creating the solution.
Exactly. Yeah. So instead of, again, another common approach, or I guess at this point it's kind of an old school approach, but the ideas first approach to innovation was common for a long, long time. It's becoming less common, but it is the traditional approach to innovation where, again, based on creativity, right? We come up with a bunch of ideas. We sit in a room and we talk amongst each other and we think, what would be cool? Or what do we think our customers want? Or, what have the salespeople heard from their customers or things like that? I mean, I was in charge of cross-functional innovation and idea generation at a major building product manufacturer. And that's what we did. We did a lot of internal ideation, right? And I had a list of thousands of ideas that I managed, and it was my job to try to kind of vet them and figure out which ones were the good ones. It was maddening, right? Because we spent so much time and money trying to figure out which of those ideas were the good ones because they were generated in a vacuum, right? A much better approach, and some companies are starting to try to do this, is the needs first approach, where before you come up with ideas, you go and discover the needs in the marketplace and figure out what the customer actually wants. Then you start to ideate within those parameters, right? It makes your ideation much, much more efficient because now you've got boundaries within which to operate. You're not ideating on the universe. You're ideating on this very specific set of needs that now you know are real. Right. Now, the way you gather those needs is another area where a lot of companies stumble because there's a lot of subjectivity that goes on there. And that's, again, where Jobs to be Done can help guide the process and structure those needs so that they're objective and not misunderstood.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's a unique approach, but when you hear it explained, it seems like that's the way it should have been done for a long time, right?
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Yeah. So
right?
Kudos to you for putting that together. And I know you've had really good results with that, specifically within the offsite industry.
Yeah. Danny, tell me like going back to some of the entrepreneurship when you started your company, what's been some of the biggest failures or setbacks that you've experienced engaging with some of this sometimes probably forced innovation on people where you're just like, tell me a little bit about that. I want you to expand on that a little bit. What I know it like for us, we deal with frustration, setbacks and failures all the time. And it's all about getting back up. But tell me a little bit about what you've experienced, especially since you started your own company a couple of years ago.
Specifically in the offsite industry, I think some of the things that I've observed that I feel like could use some help or support in the offsite industry is that in the United States, our offsite industry kind of grew up from manufactured housing, from what we call HUD code housing. And that's a different set of codes. Anybody who's in the industry knows that, that's completely different set of codes than modular construction, which is on IRC code, the same code that site-built buildings are based on, or ICC. And so it kind of evolved from that standpoint. And so it has brought with it a lot of baggage, both in the minds of the public, but also in the methodologies that have been employed. So we've kind of taken a different approach and morphed it into what is now modular construction. And when we did that, a lot of these older factories, they kind of based their manufacturing on simply the idea of doing pretty much exactly the same thing that's done on site, the same processes, the same materials, the same everything, and they simply brought it under cover, into a warehouse. Now, right there, that adds some real efficiencies, right? It makes a real difference, and they immediately had a differentiated approach, which is still better, far better in my opinion, than site-built construction for many reasons, right? It's out of the weather. Your workers are working in a controlled environment. They're often working more ergonomically, et cetera, right? You can employ some labor arbitrage by building these things in places where labor is less expensive, et cetera. So you've got some very real advantages. However, since we've kind of dragged those older methods forward, and many companies haven't been able to progress too far beyond that, now I feel like many of these older factories are kind of stuck in that pattern where they're still basically doing kind of traditional construction under a roof, and I think it's kind of stagnated their growth and progress. Now there is a newer generation of factories that are starting up that are kind of coming from a newer paradigm with automation and technology and things like that. But still, we've got the issue of the public perception of modular construction, which I think is one of our biggest problems. People in this country still tend to they still remember the old manufactured housing. We still do it, right? There's still manufactured houses out there still being built to HUD code, which is a different standard. And so we've got this confusion, this market confusion, where people still aren't sure what modular is or what the difference is between that and what they think of as modular, which is the kind of these trailer home type of buildings. And so, as we've talked about, many times, I think we've got a real PR problem in modular construction, where we have not educated the public nearly as well as we could or should, and I think that will go a long way. I don't think any of us has figured out yet exactly what that means or what it's going to take, but we've got to figure out a way to evolve the public consciousness about modular construction or offsite construction to help them understand what it really is. And then we've also got to continue to grow in our methodology and the way we do things and what we do in order to live up to and to maximize the efficiencies that are available to us in offsite construction.
Yeah. So what has been working? So you're talking about, this new wave of manufacturers who are doing things, maybe taking less cues from the past and being more innovative. So do you see any common threads where that you would suggest for any new manufacturers or even more legacy ones where you're saying these practices, these approaches are accelerating the industry and they're going to make an impact in the future? Is there any commonalities you see there?
Well, I think that, the easy answer or the knee-jerk reaction could be, to employ more automation, more robotics, things like that. But you have to be careful about that, because there's only so much that can get you, right? I believe that there's a point of diminishing returns beyond which you have diminishing returns with regards to automation in a factory, in a construction factory. So I don't think that automation and robotics is the panacea for what we need to do. But at the same time, many factories can certainly benefit from machine assist type implementations, right? Even if it's just an air lift to help them lift sheet goods into place to reduce fatigue and extend productivity throughout a shift, for example. Overhead cranes are commonly used, but certain strategic high leverage automations or machine assist employments, I think, are very much called for and could be a lot of factories could benefit from things like that. But I don't think we need to go crazy with that kind of thing. I think pursuing complete automation, at least with the materials that we're using today to build, if we're doing a stick frame construction with cavity walls out of wood or even steel, I think over automating is a real concern. So that's my opinion as far as automation goes. In addition to automation, I think that there are process improvements that can be made across the board with all factories. I know that there are, again, there's a broad range of philosophies and situations with regard to this as well. But a lot of these older factories, again, they were kind of started on the philosophy, or maybe not on the philosophy, but on the practice of building similar to the way we would build in the field, but doing it in a factory. And so a manufacturing type approach or a lean or process optimized approach was not part of that model, right? And so those factories can really, really benefit from process optimization, where they go in and analyze their processes, do time studies, do layout studies and flow diagrams and spaghetti diagrams and all those kinds of things to figure out how to make their layout more efficient, how to make their processes more efficient, how to reduce downtime in their work, etc. Some of the newer factories are better at this. They've actually got people on hand, on staff, who specialize in that, process engineers, etc. And I think they're more focused on that side of things, which is great. But so I think that's the two big things that I've observed is you've got machinery and automation, and you've also got the process. And I guess there's also the technology, right? Software and things like that, which is another area that most factories, I think, could benefit from. That's one thing I've noticed over the years is I spent some time working for a company called Manufacton that specialized in software to help offsite construction companies to manage their production. And most companies have been for a long time just using either paper, whiteboards, or maybe Excel if they're really advanced, right? So there's been a dearth of technology that's been available to help these companies be more efficient, and that's starting to change. There are several options now, but I think adopting those types of technologies can also help these companies to become more efficient.
Yeah, we've heard great things about companies like Moducore and Offsite. So I think that's key to running an efficient operation. But I mean, everything you talked about is really on the efficiency end, not on the innovation end, right? It's about capturing efficiencies to make more affordable, more profitable to do offsite construction. But I still think there's a gap in innovation where, to your point, where we're not just taking the cues from the past and taking those methodology. I know there's constraints in the building code, maybe with some materials or processes, but I think that's where the future breakthroughs are going to come from, is truly innovative new ways to build homes. Yeah. Not just more efficient ways to build homes. Yeah. Or any type of construction.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Danny, I was reading over some of your blogs, which I really enjoyed. One of them was your blog on successful innovation is about process, not personality. And one thing that hit me and kind of resonated with me was you said you can either experience boring success or exciting failure. I want you to tell me about that, because that was something it made me chuckle right when I saw it. I was like, he's absolutely spot on here, but expand on that for me.
Yeah. So this kind of goes back to the idea of the folklore of innovation, right? The reputation of innovation as being this flashy, creative process, and that we just need to hire the right people with the right minds, and they'll go innovate, right? And there's a rush, right? I've been involved in a lot of product development and innovation activities, and having a brainstorming session. You got a day-long brainstorm session with these people. You got all these smart people in the room, and you're throwing stuff out, and you come up with this list. You got a list of 500 ideas at the end of the day, and there's a serious adrenaline rush associated with that, right? You finish that day, and you're like, "Whew, that was awesome." Look at that list of stuff we got, right? But then reality sets in, and you start to think about it. You start to take down those notes, and you start to look it over and over and over, and you start to realize, oh my gosh, what have we done? Because I have no idea what to do now, right? We've got 500 or 700 ideas here. I have no idea which ones are good. So I think that innovation has gained a reputation for being this exciting exercise, but also hugely risky, right? I compare it all the time to a game of roulette. Companies innovate like they're playing a game of roulette. They're having a ton of fun, right? And they're advertising to everybody that listen, we're innovative. Look at all the stuff we're doing, right? We've got all these ideas. We've got these people that we've hired to be creative people for us, to be innovators. But their success rate is 15%, out of the stuff that they launch. And this is a national average, right? Depending on who you talk to, anywhere from 85 to 95% of new solutions fail in the marketplace. That's ridiculous, right? But we're having fun, okay? So that's what I mean by exciting failure. My approach or my belief is that I would much rather have boring success than exciting failure. And what I mean by boring success is, instead of throwing the dice and seeing if it wins, hoping that the occasional jackpot makes enough to cover all the losses. Instead of that, use a scientific approach, use discipline, use process, use data, and plod along methodically. Reduce your risk, reduce your time and your cost, and just know that we're not going to have these adrenaline rush type moments like the brainstorming sessions. But we're just going to know that we're going to hit on most of these things that we release. So that's boring success to me, and that's what I think companies need to get comfortable with and learn to go after, rather than exciting failure. And particularly in construction, I've believed for a long time that my philosophy or my theory on why construction is so far behind in innovation is because construction can't afford to do the type of innovation that we see out there, right? They can't afford to roll the dice on the roulette wheel or roll the ball on the roulette wheel as far as innovation goes. Their margins are too thin. Their risks of just running their business are too high already. And if you're an owner of a construction company and you think of the idea of innovating in the way that we're used to innovating, which is the roulette wheel approach, you're going to look at that and go, no, thank you. No, I can't. No, I'm not going to bet my company on that whole mess, right? So I think that that's why a lot of construction companies shy away from innovation. But at the same time, in the last 5 years or so, they're starting to feel more and more pressure to innovate, right? Money is being thrown at this industry. People have discovered the opportunity in construction, the gargantuan size of this industry, and so there's this pressure to innovate in construction that hasn't been there for the whole lifetime of the industry. So they're conflicted. They're feeling pressure to innovate, but they don't know how, and they feel scared, I think, to do so because it's so risky. That's why I think this engineering type approach, this scientific approach, is perfect for the construction industry. Because you think about it, construction guys are engineers at heart, I believe, right? They know how to run a project. That's what they do. That's what construction is. So if you can turn innovation into a project to manage, they're all over it, right? They're like, oh, I can do that, right? If you give them a process, a project that they can manage through a process-based approach, then they can really succeed because that's where their skill set, that's their wheelhouse. So that's what I am trying to do for the construction industry is help them to do innovation, but do it in a way that they can succeed at. And I think that that's the best way anyway.
Yeah, and have sustainability with the process and their legacy. And that's something that Carson and I even, when we initially started our company, I think it's easy to go out, and a lot of these companies, to your point, are just being bombarded with VC money and capital money. And, there's certain ways to change your trajectory on a company overnight. I mean, with that kind of money and that kind of injection. But ultimately, you end up working for someone else, and your vision is lost typically. The mission's not completed. And I think to that point, like I see a lot of the same, when I hear the word innovation, I always think of like fun, exciting things, like something's about to change, something's about to be new. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And then it a lot of times it falls flat. Yeah. I think the first person that I saw that really, in our lifetime outside of Steve Jobs, is Elon Musk. I mean, his innovation and what he's done and what he's created, his footprint and his fingerprints and what he's left behind, it'll be something that we'll never forget. It'll something go down in the history of our lifetime. Yeah. What he's done. So another thing I wanted to kind of piggyback on this. It says in that same blog, I believe this quote, it says, "But if you ask the wrong questions, ask the wrong people, or ask in the wrong way, you're going against the advice which you would give someone." Going against the wrong way, you're going to get garbage outputs, which is bad for your customers, your company, and your career. Tell me a little bit about that quote, because I like that, because it's something that we preach a lot to our consultant team about how we approach our high stakes freight clients. And hey, typically it's a level of sophistication that you have to approach these people with. Yep. Like it's not just normal. Like people look at us as a logistics company. We're almost mislabeled, to be quite honest with you. Mm-hmm. We are mislabeled, and the level of sophistication, to your point earlier, talking to project managers, talking to general contractors, it's an engineered mind. Mm-hmm. Like you have to go into it with an engineered mindset.
Right.
You can't approach these people from another vantage point because it's like talking a different language to them.
Right.
And that's something that we always continually preach as far as the approach and our high stakes freight approach and when we're engaging with a potential prospect. Like it's got to be it's almost there's a military approach to it. There's a systematic approach to how you're going to engage.
Discipline.
Absolutely. Yep. And there's a reason military does things over and over and over. Repetition creates discipline. And it's a learned trait, and we try to. That's another thing that we really try to incorporate. But I'm just curious as to some of your background there. And you seem to me, were you ever military?
I was not.
Okay.
My dad was. My brother was.
I would have guessed you would have been military in there, just because you have that pedigree of discipline, of which I admire, because it's who I am. I do everything the same thing, So I'm just interesting, because that quote really resonated with me when I was reading over it, because it's so true. If you ask the wrong questions and ask the wrong people, which that's the first thing we preach, are you talking to the right person? Because Betty at the front desk, who you don't want to run over, she's probably going to get you in the door, but she's probably not the right person.
Right.
And so we talk about that a lot, but I'd like you expand a little bit on the quote.
Yeah. So in the innovation process, those are some of the big stumbling blocks that a lot of companies make when they're trying to understand the market or understand their customers. They ask the wrong questions. They ask things about solutions, for example, right? They're solution focused 90% of the time. They ask the wrong people. So they ask the customers about the product, or they ask their internal people about ideas, right? Without about the needs of the customers. So they get those roles swapped. They're asking people about things that they don't have any business commenting on. And so those things are core to what I believe is a misguided approach to innovation, because you're going to end up, as the blog said, you're going to end up with garbage input. And when your process is fed by bad input, you're going to have bad output. And that's the case.
And you coined that term, the GIGO, right? Not to be confused with Geico, but GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out.
Giggle. Yeah, I did not invent that.
Giggle, okay.
I did not invent that. But
like it.
It's a phrase that I learned a while back. Garbage in, garbage out. So you just need to. I try to help people just slow down and be methodical in how they approach their innovation. Make sure that we know what we're going to ask, that we ask the right things, that we're focused on the right things, and that we're talking to the right people with regard to their areas of expertise, and that's going to really enhance our success rates.
And tell me about your process. I want to hear, like, from literally cradle to grave. Once you engage with someone there's obviously common interest. Tell me what the process is. What's typically the steps, and take us through kind of your creative, path to what you're ultimately trying to accomplish with that prospect.
Right. So, it occurs to me I never really kind of described the Lean Six Sigma part of my innovation process. So one part is jobs to be done, innovation theory. The other part is the Lean Six Sigma engineering process optimization methodology. There are 5 steps in Lean Six Sigma's approach to process optimization, right? Depending on if you're improving something old or developing something new, it's either DMAIC or DMADV. But the first step is define, D for define. And in that step, we define who the customer is. And the customer is always the person who's trying to get the job done, right? We define the job that they're trying to get done. We define the marketplace that we're dealing with, which is a combination of the job performer and the job they're trying to get done. And then we also define what that job looks like and what the needs are associated with that job. So we talk to that job performer or the customer at that point. A lot of qualitative interviews, in-depth interviews about what does this job look like? What are you actually trying to accomplish? Why are you doing this? How do you know when you've done it right? How do you measure success here? And we ask a ton of questions and end up with a lengthy list of needs statements that have to be worded very carefully. in order to not be misconstrued between what the customer means and what the solution provider understands from that. So once we've defined things in that first step, the next step is M, or measure. So under that step, we quantify those needs. We use quantitative surveys issued to a statistically valid sample set of those customers, and we get them to rate those needs as far as how important it is to them to get those things done, and how satisfied they are that they're able to get those things done with their current solutions. So we get importance and satisfaction numbers on each one of those needs. And this list of needs could be anywhere from 30 or 40 on the low end to, sometimes 100, 150, 175 for a really complex job. But we get a number, two numbers for each of those. And then we combine those and do a mathematical calculation on those numbers and come up with a score, or opportunity score, if you will, that basically kind of gives a grade for each of those needs as far as how unmet or underserved each of those needs is. So combining how important it is with how satisfied they are, we can figure out where our opportunities are for innovation. So we do that calculation, then we analyze those numbers, and I've kind of bled into analyze with the statistical analysis that we do on those survey results, those numbers. We figure out what the opportunity scores are, identify the opportunities for innovation. So now we know where to strike with our innovation, right? Now we've got a guideline as to our ideation, right? We're not just openly ideating. We've got our boundaries now, right? We know that there's a whole slew of things that either don't matter that much to the customer, or they're able to get it done very well already. Thank you very much. So we don't need to bother. We're not going to be able to add value there, right? So we choose this small subset of things that we've determined now are very important to this customer when they're trying to get this job done, but they're not very satisfied right now with how they're able to get it done with what's out there. So there are our opportunities for adding value. So that's what I help them go after. So that the fourth step, if we're developing something new, is to innovate, or to invent, if you will, right? So we develop, I work with them to start to develop concepts based on applying the data to develop concepts for how they can improve their or develop a new solution. And then the last one is C, or confirm. So we can actually confirm, go back to the job performers and validate, go back with them to them with these concepts and say, how would this change your satisfaction if you had this type of solution? So we can kind of verify before we go to development that we're on the right track. So that's the process. I've taken that structure from Lean Six Sigma and combined it with the philosophy of jobs to be done, and specifically targeted it to the construction industry to develop this process that I call Engineerovation.
Very cool. That's the type of process we always try to go through, but it's more structured and detailed, right? We're trying to meet with these prospects, understand their needs, and if we don't have a solution already, create one for them, and compare that against the baseline, their old world, compare it to the new world with our solution. But I think with you, I think there's a big advantage of having a third party manage that process, because sometimes these prospects are just a little reluctant to give us that level of depth of information because they don't know where our incentives lie. Right. Or they assume they're, it's all in an attempt to be sold rather than to be understood and to create an actual valuable product. Yeah. Which is why it makes sense to have a third party, a consulting team go do this work. There's probably a level of depth and quality of data that you could obtain that no one else could. Yeah, you're right. That's kind of, from my perspective, that's one of the real advantages to having a third party come in and do it, because in my experience, customers will be a lot more open and honest with a third party than they will with a solution provider, right? Because again, they question your motives. They question, if I say something wrong, or if I, or sometimes they want to please you, right? If they've already got a relationship with you, they want to say what you want to hear. And so you get this tainted input. Another
Another reason that a third party is good to have, specifically in this situation, is because jobs to be done is not something that everybody understands or is able to do, right? I've had a lot of years of training, study, experience, right? Certified in this area. It's not your typical market research questions, right? It's not the old hat, what keeps you up at night, those kinds of questions. It's very specific.
Let's talk about that real quick.
Questioning, right? Yeah. So it takes experience. It takes training to know how to do this and to know how to word these things so that you don't misunderstand them. Because you can do everything right as far as asking questions and drawing things. And let's assume that they're completely honest with you and they give you exactly how they're feeling. You still have another hurdle of correctly interpreting all of that, right? And that's where almost all companies fall down, because it always loses something in translation between what they capture from their customer and what their engineers interpret from that. And so you end up, and that's probably the worst, is when you feel like you did everything right. Tony Olwick tells this story about how he got started when he was with HP. He thought he had done everything right with development of the I'll have to think of the name of the computer that they developed, but they'd worked so hard, spent billions of dollars researching with customers. They thought they'd done everything right. They came out with this product and it absolutely bombed. And they were beside themselves. They couldn't figure out why. Like, we did everything right. We were so careful. The problem was that they had a difference in definition of needs, and they had misinterpreted what their customers had said and come out with something that they were absolutely confident was spot on because they thought they were following what the customer said, but it wasn't. And nobody bought it. So it takes some skill and some understanding of the process to be able to do it right.
And the measurement process seems critical because you're basically taking all of those jobs to be done and those needs, and then you're saying, how well are they being done today? So that's the benchmark.
Right. And
then that identifies where the opportunity is, because they may have several or some fraction of them, maybe the needs are being met adequately, or maybe overmet.
Yep.
There's opportunity to cut costs there, right?
Exactly.
So, it all makes sense. And it seems like what it would reveal at the end of the process is a very targeted opportunity.
Yes.
Which makes innovation easier.
Exactly. So your quantity of ideas is a lot less under this approach because you've only got a small area that you're even working in, right? So you don't end up with lists of 500 ideas. You end up with a list of maybe half a dozen ideas. But you know that those half a dozen ideas are very highly likely to be successful because they're based on real data that you've gathered carefully, that you've quantified, that you've correctly interpreted, and now it's just a matter of rolling them out. And success rates go from 10 to 15% to 80, 85% because you've done that work up front.
Yeah, a lot of your analytics provides a lot of definitives, and that's really the exclamation point I feel within your formula, which is. It's refreshing to hear because even a lot of times on our end, hearing you say needs before solutions, there's a lot of times we lead with solutions, just like every other company. So it's interesting. You challenge my thinking on what I'm going to talk to our little consultant team about when we get back to the office. So I appreciate you sharing that. It's interesting.
And from an experience standpoint for us, some of our best innovations they began with the need. Like, some of our things like a transit buffer, which is when the need we're trying to solve is these modules had to leave the facility and they had to be just in time, but they might be a 4 or 5 day transit. So there's no room for error if you just plan on a 4 or 5 day transit. So instead of setting up a staging yard where you'd have to deliver it, unload it, and there's extra touches there, and then do a shuttle to do delivery to the job site, we were just paying drivers an extra amount to arrive a day early or 2 days early and just hang out. And that was based off of the need. Same thing with
site surveys,
where we go to the job site before a project starts so we can get our eyes on the job site, make sure there's no impediments to ingress and egress, and make sure that the foreman is on the same page as the manufacturer on what's supposed to happen.
Right.
Shake hands with people and see, anticipate any challenges before they occur. And those are things we just ran into over time and said, next time we have to do this, and we implement those things, and those things always work. Those have a nearly 100% hit rate for value creation versus the idea generated.
And now we've woven them right into the fiber of our internal flywheel. So it's the process has got to be better and better and better every time.
Yeah.
And we always use the analogy. I'm a king of analogies, by the way, but I'll always use the analogy of it's a 5-star hotel, and there's a lot of people who can't afford a 5-star hotel, but we have to make them feel like we have to get them coming back. There's got to be a sticky factor to what we do, because we're ultimately selling an intangible. We're selling pixie dust. We're selling a promise, but we got to deliver on the execution piece of it. And to that point, some of the internal flywheel stuff that we started doing, particular part of our process of engaging with high stakes rate clients, was there was just this multitude of things that just continued to fall in our lap. Like, oh my God, we need to do this. We need to do that. And it just kept adding up. It's no different than like the 5-star hotel analogy. I mean, from the moment you get there, what you're going to experience before you even lay your head on the pillow, before you even have a dinner or tea at the hotel. It's just amazing to me, some of the processes that we've had to kind of go through and what we've learned over the process of this logistical nightmare that a lot of these manufacturers deal with, specifically on the offsite business. That to me has been the most eye-opening thing. And that's why we've started to run towards that. Like, we are running so fast towards this industry, just simply from the standpoint of we want to expand this niche, and we want to own it, and we're going to put our flag in the ground, and we're going to fly it high, and that's kind of our ultimate goal with this. And it's just interesting to hear your vantage point, because yours is so much process oriented. It's a proven formula, and I think that sometimes when people hear the word consultant, it's almost kind of like a broker. There's cringe. There's some cringe in there. Yeah. Like, oh, this guy's going to come in here like he knows it all.
Right.
But ultimately, you're in there trying to just, create efficiencies for them. And I've always said every company, no matter the size, no matter the culture, every company has an inefficiency that they're blind to. And it's our jobs to really identify those. Like I always say, our hat, one of our hats that we wear is like a private investigator.
Right.
Go find the problem. Diagnose the patient.
Yeah.
They need this. And once they find that unexpected value that we provide, then it becomes that aha moment that, oh my God, I can't believe we did this for so long without that. That's what it becomes. Yeah. And that might not sound innovative, but damn, it feels good to do that for somebody. It really does. And to have them come back because of the way it made them feel and that value, to me, that's the best feeling in the world of what we get to do.
Yeah. And I liked what you said about using proven principles, right? And I think that that's especially important in the construction industry, because construction folks they're a suspicious bunch in a lot of ways, right? Because, there's, especially lately, it seems like there's always this technology du jour, or this, the latest, greatest nifty thing coming by. And, a lot of these guys, they've been at this a long time, right? Construction is one of the oldest industries. And so these guys, they know what they're doing, right? And they have, they've got a lot of experience. And so they're skeptical about a lot of new things coming down the pike that get thrown at them. And what I really enjoy about what I do is I didn't invent any of this, right? I'm taking Lean Six Sigma, which is a combination of two manufacturing philosophies that have been proven effective in the manufacturing industry for 70 years in this country. And then jobs to be done theory, which I also didn't invent, but has also proven to reduce the risk and cost of innovation and speed it up, et cetera. And I just kind of mashed them together and tailored them to construction. And so this isn't like a newfangled thing here. This is just kind of my way of observing that there are some principles at work that I think can benefit this industry. So let's put them to work. And I've just combined them in a way that I think works well for the construction industry. And I think you guys have done the same kind of thing, right? to have a new, fresh twist on logistics. Logistics is one of those things that I feel like is so overlooked in the offsite construction industry, but it's so central to the value proposition of offsite construction, right? It's one of the things that is different about offsite construction than onsite, and it's one of the areas that can cause some of the biggest failures in offsite construction. Is you read about these projects that didn't go well, or that the customer had complaints about with offsite. A lot of them come down to something associated with logistics or delivery or something like that, right? So I think it's brilliant that you guys are taking hold of that logistics piece and running with it and try to transform it, because it needs transformation for sure. And I think that's one of the biggest areas where offsite construction can improve and change its trajectory as far as market share growth in this country.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, because the first thing that we typically see, and I mentioned this last night at dinner, is we see this all the time, where we'll send over to the digital proposal, or they'll under budget by X amount. They go in with a cheaper option, which a lot of people do, and I understand that. Mm-hmm. But this is a get what you pay for industry, and there's a lot of moving parts to high stakes freight. That's just it. And your brand reputation's on the line.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you're hanging your hat on a price point where you're setting yourself up for ultimate failure for the project and your next project, more importantly. And what we try to do is eliminate the hypotheticals. Like, we need definitives, and we literally build around those definitives of a project based on site surveys, getting out boots on the ground. We want to meet with the GC. We want to eliminate driver friction. We want to eliminate any bottlenecks or headaches or challenges at the job site. Mm-hmm. That's rule number one. A GC doesn't want to deal with a truck driver. They've got bigger fish to fry on the job site, right? We understand that. And a project manager, they're all wearing their multiple hats. So we try to eliminate that right away. And so it's just like, is maybe as cliche as it sounds, the communication, the transparency, that has to be so definitive and so driven home from the onset of the project of what we expect and the standards that we have behind the project, right? Yeah. And those are the things that I look at so much when we get these last minute, oh, hey, we need you to step in on this project. And then we got to go put the Superman cape on. We see this.
We broke it. Will you fix it?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. It's just.
Or we forgot to consider logistics.
Sure.
That's a common thing that we see.
And to your point, there almost needs to be a written formula for offsite construction companies, manufacturers, that lead with logistics instead of making logistics last. Like, they're starting with A, and they're ending with Z, but we're not even a part of the process at all until after the fact. And then by then it's too late. You've blown through your budget. This project is now costing you money.
Right.
And it just doesn't set anyone up for success right out of the gate. So that we see this all the time. It's really frustrating, but it's garnered a lot of business for us as well. So
yeah, I mean, what we've been trying to educate our clients on is that transportation should be part of the design and engineering process. Mm-hmm. And I just got an email this morning. Our director of operations, Sean, is working on helping one of our clients, the client we talked about last night, where they overbuilt something that actually couldn't be physically delivered. Mm-hmm. They came to us this morning and said, help us create some standardized options of where it's going to limit our optionality to ship. So what dimensions, what considerations do we need to try to optimize for? And so that as we standardize our unit sizes, we know we have confidence we can ship it, and we can ship it affordably. So that consultative approach we have is working, especially with those who are trying to improve all the time. And I think what enables this is that we're only focused on this industry. Mm-hmm. One of my mentors, he says, your eyes only see and your ears only hear what your brain is looking for. So because we're so interested in helping the industry, we are seeing things we wouldn't otherwise see. We're hearing conversations we wouldn't otherwise hear. And we're doing things like this, talking to Danny, who you have your own unique perspective. So the more the industry can be surrounded by people like this, specialists, software companies like you talked about that are tailored towards this, the offsites and the moducores, where all they do is optimize for offsite construction. The more the industry is supported by service providers like that, the easier it is for them to get traction. So, I mean, that's our mission, is to help accelerate the industry through innovation and through removing hurdles that they're seeing. And you're certainly a big part of it, and that's why we wanted to talk with you.
Great. Yeah, I'm really excited about this whole thing. I'm really glad that you guys are out there doing this, because it's a big need.
We call it God's work is what we're doing. Is what we call it. I mean,
that might be a little too much.
It feels like it sometimes. It feels like it. And ultimately what you're really trying to find with what we always have, what's really nailed home some of our success and some of the most long tenured relationships that we have, is just literally when you can sit down with somebody such as yourself, if you're the client and the walls come down, you can talk about some of the vulnerabilities and some of your blind spots at the company. And where we step in and just simply become an extension of who you are. You're manufacturing these chairs and these tables. You're not in the freight business.
Right.
That's what we do. And we can kind of step in and just be that continued voice of reason. Like, hey, you might want to look at it from this vantage point. No different than we're just talking about this conversation with Sean this morning. And it's just simple. I mean, sometimes it's just about open transparency and more or less somebody who will listen.
Right.
Because everyone is very reluctant for some reason to admit an error. I think that's one of the biggest challenges with our society, is just taking ownership on what you say and what you do. Like, stand up for yourself. Like, do that. I think that we could all learn a little bit from that. And that's what we learned through a lot of our clients. But the longest tenured clients, the very first thing that we have is just value alignment. You're talking the same language from the first sentence you say on the phone, and you're nodding just the same kind of conversational stuff that we get it. It's just, we call them our OKGs, or our kind of guys, or our kind of girls. That's what we call them. And you just know it when you're talking to them. And those are the long tenured relationships that you value the most. They walk you through every fire, every challenge, any hiccup that you might have, because there will be. It's not if, it's when.
Right.
Those are the things that'll get you through to the finish line. And just like I would say, anyone can get one load. That's easy to do in our industry. But can you get the life of the client? Can you keep them forever? And that's ultimately what we're trying to do and what we're trying to create at our company. And, when we first started this, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll ramp it up and kind of see where it goes. Man, this is so much bigger than this now. Now we're talking legacy. We want to build something that somebody's going to remember, and hopefully that what we're doing is making a major impact and a major difference. And that's the reason that we've pivoted so hard to high stakes freight. And we couldn't be more excited about it, because this niche will only expand for us and for you, for that matter.
Yeah.
You're creating expansion for us, so we appreciate that. Yeah, you're out there on the front
Thank
lines
you.
educating people about it, which is great because it'll bring awareness to the table, which I think that's what really needs to come to fruition more than anything.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's take a little turn here, and I want to hear about your company name, Da Vinci. And after talking with you, it's starting to make some more sense, because talk about a guy who's creative and artful, but does so from an engineering mindset, right?
Yeah.
Just reading his biography by Walter Isaacson, you get a really deep dive and seeing this guy who would just spend hours studying nature in an effort to be able to capture it better on canvas, right? So tell us more about that.
Yeah, you got the joke. You picked up on exactly what was behind that name. So Da Vinci is kind of everybody's prototype of the Renaissance man, right? And what we mean when we say Renaissance man nowadays is someone who has multiple and varied skills and masteries.
And a lot of hair on their chest.
Yeah. Yes, of course. You got to have that. But so, yeah, it's that hybrid approach, that hybrid ability that that I have related to since my college days, like I talked about, right? Being able to combine technical and engineering and process-based, methodical, scientific, left-brained approach with the right-brained creativity and ability to relate to people and ability to understand markets and things like that. Combining those things into something that's better than specializing in either, in my view. So so Da Vinci to me represents what I want to be. I want to be a hybrid or an amphibian, as I've called myself sometimes, able to live on land and in the water.
I like that.
So yeah, I try to kind of follow what he did in his life with business, with innovation. And so I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we've really enjoyed this conversation. So let everyone know how they can get a hold of you. What's a preferred method?
Sure. So you can email me at dSmall@davinciinno.com. So DAVINCIINNO, 2 I's, 2 N's, .com. My website, davinciinno.com. You can check out my blog on my website there.
And check out his LinkedIn as well. You put out some great content. You're very
LinkedIn.
active on there, sharing some useful information about the industry and some videos.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thank you
Been
so
really
much for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Really
Congrats and good work. Keep it up.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Thanks.